I've always loved driving at night. It's something about the silence and the emptiness of the road. The world feels different when everyone else is asleep. No cars, no people, just me and the road stretching endlessly in front of me. I can think, I can breathe, I can just be. This night, though, felt different. The air was thick, almost suffocating, like something was waiting, lurking in the dark corners. But I brushed it off. I'd been driving this route for years. Nothing ever happened. Or so I thought. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the asphalt, the trees lining the sides of the road, and the occasional flicker of something that seemed to move just out of sight. I put on some music to fill the silence, the soft hum of the car engine and the rhythm of the song mixing together. It was supposed to be comforting, but tonight it fell off. I remember turning the volume up, trying to push the feeling away, when I saw him. A figure standing by the side of the road, just outside the reach of my headlights. He wasn't waving or signaling for a ride. He just stood there, staring at the car. I slowed down, unsure whether I should stop. My gut told me not to, but I've always been the type to help someone out if they needed it. I was a sucker for hitchhikers. People in need. It wasn't a big deal, right? It's just a guy, probably stranded, maybe a little weird, but no harm, right? I pulled over, and he came up to the window. The second I saw his face, something inside me recoiled. It wasn't like he looked monstrous or anything. He was just off. There was something about the way he looked at me that didn't sit right. Like he could see right through me, past all the layers I put up. I felt exposed. "Can I get a ride?" he asked, his voice low, almost like it was coming from somewhere far away. I hesitated for a second longer than I should have. "Sure," I said, rolling the window down just enough for him to speak. He didn't seem in a rush. He didn't even seem to care about the weather. He just stood there, watching me, like he had all the time in the world. I unlocked the door, and he climbed in. The air inside the car felt colder. I didn't notice it at first, but it was like the temperature dropped the second he sat down. I shrugged it off again. It was late. Maybe I was just tired. "So, where you headed?" I asked, trying to make small talk. He glanced at me, his eyes dark, too dark. "Wherever you're going." I thought that was a weird answer, but I didn't press it. I kept my eyes on the road, my fingers drumming on the steering wheel. The silence between us stretched, and I could feel him staring at me, his presence like a weight in the car. It was too much, too heavy. I had to break the tension. You need help with anything?" I asked. He didn't respond right away. He just smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It wasn't reassuring. It was like he was laughing at a joke I wasn't in on. "I'm fine," he said finally. "Just need a ride." I nodded, but something didn't feel right. It wasn't like I was scared of him. Not exactly. More like something was wrong with the whole situation. Like I was playing into something that I didn't fully understand. And then he spoke again, his voice low, as if he was sharing a secret. "You're wondering why I'm here, aren't you?" I froze. My heart skipped a beat. It wasn't just the words. It was the way he said them. Like he knew exactly what I was thinking. Like he could hear every single thought I had. But that's impossible, right? There's no way. I didn't believe in any of that paranormal crap. I'm not one of those people. But the way he spoke, the way his eyes locked onto mine, made me feel like he was reading my mind. I couldn't shake it. "Sorry," I muttered, trying to shake off the unease. "You just caught me off guard, that's all." He didn't respond, just kept staring, his gaze unwavering. The air in the car felt thick now, like something was pressing in from all sides. I couldn't breathe right, couldn't think straight. My hands were sweaty on the wheel. I told myself to focus. Just drive. It was just a guy. I was being paranoid. Nothing was wrong. But I couldn't shake the feeling. I couldn't shake the idea that maybe, just maybe, I had made a mistake. I tried to focus on the road ahead. My hands a little too tight on the wheel now. His presence was just wrong. It wasn't something I could explain, but it was there, like a shadow following me, lingering in the corners of my mind. He was still silent, just sitting there in the passenger seat, watching me. His eyes never left me. The tension was suffocating. I tried to remind myself that I wasn't afraid, that I was just being paranoid. But it didn't help. The silence stretched on. I needed to break it. So I tried again, asking some stupid question, something to fill the space. So, how's the road been for you? Long trip. His lips curled slightly, just enough to show a little smile. It wasn't reassuring. It wasn't anything. It was just a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Long enough, he said, his voice still low, distant. There was again that feeling that something wasn't right. I tried to shake it off, telling myself that I was being ridiculous. He was just a guy, right? Nothing to worry about. Nothing at all. But then it was like he could hear my thoughts. Or maybe I was just too damn obvious. You don't believe in this kind of stuff, do you? He asked, and his voice was softer, like he was talking to himself rather than me. I was taken aback. What kind of stuff? I asked, even though I had a feeling I knew what he meant. Ghosts. Shadows. Things that follow you, he said, his voice almost a whisper, as if saying the words made them more real. I didn't know how to answer. I don't believe in any of that crap. I've always been a skeptic. Ghosts, spirits, none of that made sense to me. People are just afraid of things they don't understand, right? Look, I'm just giving you a ride, I said, trying to sound calm, trying to brush off the weirdness of his words. I don't know what you're talking about. He didn't respond. He just kept staring at me with those dark eyes. And for a second, just a split second, I felt like maybe, just maybe, he was reading me. I shook it off. There was no way. I wasn't going to start freaking myself out over some random guy I picked up. That wasn't me. I wasn't that kind of person. Okay, well, you've got a ways to go before you get where you're going, I said, trying to keep the conversation casual. You sure you're good for the trip? He nodded slowly, his eyes still locked on me. Yeah, he said, his voice almost too calm, like everything was perfectly fine. And I wanted to believe him. I really did. But then something shifted. The air in the car felt colder, heavier, like it was pressing in on me. I wasn't sure what it was, but I knew it wasn't just the temperature. I glanced over at him. He was still staring at me, his expression blank, but there was something else there now. Something I couldn't place. Something I didn't want to think about. I forced myself to keep my eyes on the road. The darkness around us was endless, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed, even though there was nothing behind me. This was crazy. It had to be. I didn't believe in this stuff. I couldn't. But then why couldn't I shake the feeling that I wasn't alone in the car anymore? The silence between us felt unbearable now. Every minute that passed seemed like it stretched into eternity, and I could feel his eyes on me, sharp and unblinking. It was like he was studying me, not just seeing me, but reading every part of who I was. I forced myself to focus on the road, the endless black ribbon of asphalt stretching ahead, the headlights slicing through the dark. The world outside was empty, quiet. It should have been peaceful, but with him sitting next to me, it felt more like a trap. So, where exactly are you headed? I asked again, trying to get the conversation back on track. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he just kept staring at the road ahead, like he was deep in thought. His face was expressionless, but I could feel something under the surface, something that didn't belong. Wherever you're going, he finally said, his voice low, almost like he was mumbling to himself. I blinked, not sure how to take that. What do you mean, wherever I'm going? I asked, genuinely confused. But he didn't answer. He just turned his head slowly, his eyes locking with mine again. And for a second, I felt like I was falling into those eyes. It wasn't just a gaze. It was like he was pulling me in deeper and deeper into a place I didn't want to go. I snapped my head back to the road, trying to shake off the strange sensation. I wasn't going to let this guy get to me. I wasn't. He was just some hitchhiker, probably a little strange, maybe a little off, but nothing more than that. I had to remind myself of that again and again. Nothing to worry about. The silence returned, thicker this time, and I found myself glancing at him every few seconds just to make sure he wasn't doing anything weird. But every time I looked, he was still just sitting there, hands folded in his lap, staring straight ahead. I decided to try a different approach. "So, where are you from?" I asked. A simple question, maybe a way to break the tension. But instead of answering me right away, he just tilted his head, like he was thinking about it. "Not from around here," he said after a long pause. I nodded, trying to seem casual. "Yeah, I figured. I've never seen you before." I couldn't help but feel a little relieved by the normalcy of the answer, even though I was sure it didn't really mean anything. He didn't say anything else. I tried to keep my mind off the weirdness of the situation, tried to focus on the road, but the thoughts kept creeping in uninvited. What was this guy doing out here, this late with nowhere to go? What did he want from me? I wasn't stupid. People didn't just hitchhike out in the middle of nowhere without a reason. My eyes flicked to him again, and I swear, this time, I saw something shift in his expression. His lips didn't move, but I could feel him smiling just a little. A smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. It made my skin crawl. "Why are you so quiet?" I asked, my voice a little sharper than I meant it to be. "Aren't you going to tell me anything about yourself?" His gaze turned to me, and I swear it was like he knew exactly what I was thinking, exactly what I was feeling. There was something unsettling about the way he looked at me, like he could hear every thought in my head. "I already told you," he said, his voice low and measured. "I'm wherever you're going." I didn't know what to say to that. It was like he was speaking in riddles, or like he wasn't really here with me at all, but somewhere else. "Okay," I said, my hands gripping the wheel a little too tightly. "You know, you're a little strange. Not like most people I pick up." He didn't respond to that. He just looked at me, but his eyes, God, those eyes. They weren't just eyes anymore. They were like windows into something else. Something I didn't want to see. The road ahead stretched on, and I tried to ignore the sinking feeling in my gut. I kept my eyes on the headlights, focusing on the straight line ahead of me. But it was hard. It was hard not to feel like something was about to happen. Like something was already happening. I couldn't explain why, but I knew this wasn't just a ride anymore. Something was wrong, and I was too deep into it to back out now. The silence hung between us again, heavier this time. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching me, waiting for me to say something, but I didn't know what to say. I kept trying to keep it together, trying to stay calm. But every second that passed felt like it was stretching out, dragging me deeper into something I didn't understand. "So," I said after a while, my voice a little more nervous than I meant it to be. "You never told me your name." The guy didn't even flinch. His expression didn't change, but his eyes were always the same. They didn't blink, didn't move. It was like he was waiting for me to say something else, like everything I said was already planned out in his head. "Does it matter?" he asked finally, his voice flat, almost detached. I hesitated. I didn't know why it felt so important, but I had to know. "I mean, yeah, it kinda does. You know, for courtesy, or whatever." He didn't respond, just sat there, still staring straight ahead. I tried to ignore the unsettling feeling creeping up my spine. It was hard to focus on the road with him like this, like I was trapped in a moment I couldn't escape. Then, just when I thought he was going to stay quiet, he spoke again. "You've been thinking about this for a while, haven't you?" he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I froze, my heart racing. "What are you talking about?" "About what's going on right now," he said. "About me. About you. About the road ahead." I couldn't breathe. My mind was spinning. How the hell did he know? It was impossible. There was no way he could know what I was thinking. I hadn't said a word. I don't know what you mean," I stammered, trying to keep my voice steady. "What's happening?" "Nothing's happening." He didn't answer right away, just stared at me. The longer he looked, the more I felt like my skin was crawling, like his gaze was digging into me, searching for something I didn't want him to find. "You think I'm crazy, don't you?" he said, his voice calm and almost amused. But you're starting to see it, aren't you? You're starting to realize what this is. I shook my head, trying to fight the panic rising inside me. No, I'm not. I'm just giving you a ride. That's it. His eyes never left me. You've been driving for a long time. Long enough to know that sometimes you don't get to leave. I felt a chill run down my spine. What the hell was he talking about? His words made no sense, but they hung in the air like a weight, like they were part of something much bigger than this random, weird encounter. I glanced at the road ahead, trying to focus. I couldn't let him get to me. I couldn't let him mess with my head. You're not making any sense, I said, more to myself than to him. I'm just trying to drive you to wherever you're going, and that's all. He didn't respond to that, but his eyes still held mine, and the silence in the car seemed to grow even thicker. I could feel the air getting colder, like the temperature in the car was dropping. I tried to ignore it, but the hairs on the back of my neck were standing up, and I could swear I heard a soft sound behind me, like something moving just outside the car. But when I turned my head, there was nothing. You're not alone, you know, he said suddenly. Not anymore. I looked at him in confusion. What? He turned his head toward me, and this time there was a slight smirk on his lips. You're being watched. You always have been. I felt my stomach twist. I was trying to stay calm, but everything in me was screaming that something was horribly wrong. His words, they didn't make any sense, but the way he said them, the way he looked at me, it was like he knew something I didn't. I don't know what the hell you're talking about, I said, trying to sound firm, but my voice was shaking. You need to stop. But he didn't stop. He just kept staring at me, and I felt like I was being pulled into his gaze, like I was losing control. And then he spoke again, in that quiet, almost casual way, like he wasn't talking to me at all. You'll see. Soon. It won't be long now. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to react to that. I wasn't a believer in anything supernatural. I didn't believe in ghosts, spirits, or whatever the hell he was hinting at. But right then, in that car with him sitting next to me, I wasn't sure anymore. I didn't believe in any of that, but I was starting to wonder if I should. The road ahead blurred as the minutes stretched into an uncomfortable silence. I could feel the weight of his presence, even though he didn't say anything else. Every time I glanced at him, I caught that same strange look in his eyes, almost like he was waiting for me to break, to lose control. I was trying to convince myself that this was nothing. He was just some weird guy, probably mentally off, but that didn't explain the way he knew things. It didn't explain his constant stare or the things he said. I tried to focus on the road, my hands gripping the wheel a little too tightly. The faint hum of the tires on the asphalt was the only sound in the car now, but it felt like the world was pressing in on me from all sides. Out of nowhere, he spoke again, his voice breaking the tense quiet. You still don't understand, do you? I glanced at him quickly, then back at the road. Understand what? I asked, trying to sound calm, but I couldn't hide the edge in my voice. The way this is all connected, he said. You're not just taking me somewhere. You're taking yourself somewhere too. And once you get there, you won't be able to turn back. I didn't know what the hell he was talking about, but I felt my pulse quicken. What the hell is that supposed to mean? I snapped. He didn't answer, just sat there, like he was waiting for me to figure it out myself. His gaze was colder now, sharper. The air in the car felt like it was getting thinner, harder to breathe. I glanced at the rearview mirror, and my breath caught in my throat. There in the distance was a pair of headlights far off, but getting closer. I thought nothing of it at first, assuming it was just another car behind me. But as it got closer, I realized it wasn't following the same rhythm as normal traffic. It was erratic, like the driver was swerving or speeding up, trying to catch up. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I could hear the guy next to me breathing now, slow and steady, like nothing was wrong. Don't worry, he said softly, like he could feel the tension building in me. It's not them you need to worry about. Then what the hell is it? I muttered under my breath, my grip tightening on the wheel as I sped up, hoping to outrun whatever was behind me. But the headlights kept getting closer, faster. My heart pounded in my chest, my hands trembling on the wheel. It didn't make sense. No one had been behind me for miles, and now there was a car on my tail, closing in way too quickly. I slammed my foot down harder on the gas, the engine roaring in protest. The car behind me kept gaining speed, staying on my tail like it knew exactly where I was going. "What do you want?" I shouted, my voice shaking. "What the hell do you want from me?" The guy next to me didn't flinch. "It's not about what they want," he said, his voice eerily calm. "It's about what you need to do." "What?" I said, barely able to keep my voice steady. I didn't understand. This didn't make sense. Nothing made sense anymore. I glanced at the rearview mirror again. The headlights were closer now, way too close. It was like they were right behind me, even though I hadn't heard any sound of a car pulling up next to me. The air in the car felt thick, suffocating. My skin was crawling. I couldn't take it anymore. "Stop the car," I said suddenly, my voice shaking with the sudden urge to get away from him. "I need to get out. Right now." For the first time, he moved. His eyes locked on mine, a strange smile curling on his lips. "You're already too far gone," he said softly. "You can't stop it now." Before I could react, I glanced back at the rearview mirror one more time. And that's when I saw it. The car behind me, those headlights were gone. Just like that. Vanished. I slammed my foot on the brake, skidding to a halt in the middle of the road. My hands were shaking, and my heart was racing in my chest. I could feel my breath coming in short gasps, like I had just run a marathon. I turned to the guy, but he wasn't looking at me anymore. He was staring straight ahead, the same blank expression on his face. It was like the car behind me had never been there. Like nothing had happened. I had no words. I had no idea what was going on. "I don't know what you're doing," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But you need to get out. Right now." He didn't move. I was starting to lose it. Something was wrong with this entire situation. With everything. And it was like the guy next to me knew it. "You don't want to know what's really happening," he said, his voice distant. "Trust me, you're better off not knowing." I didn't know what to say to that. I just wanted to get away from him. I didn't care if he was a hitchhiker or something else. I didn't care about anything anymore. "Just get out," I said again, my voice trembling. "Please, just leave me alone." But still he didn't move. And that's when I realized he wasn't just some guy I picked up. He was something else. I sat there, frozen, staring at the man next to me. The air in the car was thick, heavy, and the coldness of it seeped into my bones. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I was going crazy or if something truly insane was happening. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was about to burst from my chest. "Please," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Get out. You're scaring me." But he didn't move, didn't even blink. He just sat there, as still as ever, like he was made of stone. I looked at him, my hands still gripping the wheel, and for the first time in my life, I truly felt like I was in the presence of something unnatural. I shook my head, trying to clear my thoughts. This couldn't be real. None of this made sense. He wasn't a ghost or a monster. He was just a guy, right? A guy who was what? Out of his mind? But no matter how many times I told myself that, the strange, nagging feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. Something about him, about this whole situation, didn't add up. And the more I thought about it, the more it gnawed at me, pulling me into a darker place. I turned the car on again, slamming my foot on the gas and speeding down the road. I had to get out of there. I had to get away from him. I didn't care what was going on, I just wanted it to stop. I needed to feel like I was in control again. But the moment I looked back at him, the moment I even thought about him, that feeling hit me again. His eyes, they never moved. They were locked on me, like he was waiting for me to do something. "Where are you going?" he asked, his voice cutting through the noise of the engine. "You can't outrun this." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. My foot slid off the gas for a second, and the car slowed down as I processed what he'd said. I couldn't outrun this? What the hell did he mean by that? The road ahead was clear. The headlights of my car illuminated the empty stretch of asphalt, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. That someone was right behind me, watching me, waiting for me to realize it. I glanced at the rearview mirror. There was nothing there, nothing except the darkness and the echoing silence that seemed to swallow everything around me. I wanted to scream, but the words wouldn't come out. "You're not going to get away from me," he said, almost in a whisper. "Not now. Not ever." The words were soft, like he was just stating a fact. Like he knew something I didn't. And in that moment, I was almost certain he did. The next few minutes were a blur. I drove faster, slamming my foot down harder on the pedal, trying to outrun whatever this was, trying to get to a point where it would just stop. But the road never ended. It just stretched out endlessly, the trees on either side like looming shadows, the black sky above me pressing down like a heavy weight. It felt like I was trapped in some kind of loop, going nowhere. I glanced at him again. His face was still expressionless, but his eyes were glowing now, faintly, like they were lit from within. I couldn't look away. I couldn't breathe. "Why?" I choked out, barely able to speak. "Why me? Why are you doing this?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he just smiled. A small, unsettling smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. "Because you're mine now," he said, his voice low and distant. "You always have been." And that's when it hit me. The moment the words left his mouth, I understood. I wasn't the one in control anymore. I never had been. This was never about giving him a ride. This was never about some random hitchhiker. This was about me, about my life, about everything I thought I knew. And now there was no escaping it. There was no going back. I wasn't just taking him somewhere. He was taking me somewhere. And I didn't know if I'd ever make it out. The thought hit me like a punch to the gut, and for a split second, I thought I might lose consciousness. My vision blurred, and I could feel the blood rushing in my ears. The road seemed to spin, like the whole world was tilting to the side. "Stop," I gasped, trying to steady myself. "Please, just stop." But the car didn't stop. The road didn't stop. It just kept going, endlessly, with no sign of relief. I was trapped. And as much as I wanted to believe I could find a way out, deep down I knew it was over. I was already lost. "Get out," I whispered. But it wasn't for him anymore. It was for me. But nothing happened. And the road stretched on. The air in the car grew colder with every mile I drove. I kept my eyes on the road, but I could feel him beside me. His presence like a weight pressing down on my chest, making it harder to breathe. The longer I drove, the more I felt like I was sinking into some sort of nightmare. I couldn't make sense of any of it. The man, if he could even be called that, wasn't human. There was something off about him, something so far beyond the realm of what I thought was possible. The things he had said, the way he looked at me like he knew everything about me, like he had been following me my entire life. My hands were sweating as I gripped the steering wheel. I knew I should be scared. I knew this was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to stop. I didn't want to face him. I didn't want to face whatever was happening. I just wanted it all to go away, but it wasn't going to go away. I glanced at the clock on the dashboard. 2:47 a.m. The hours were slipping by like sand through my fingers. The road was still empty. No other cars in sight. Just the occasional flicker of streetlights passing by, illuminating the trees and the endless stretch of asphalt. I was starting to wonder if I was just going insane. Maybe this was all in my head. Maybe it was the exhaustion catching up with me. But even as I thought that, I knew it wasn't true. This was real. This man was real. And whatever was happening was real. "You can't keep running," he said suddenly, his voice breaking the silence. "You can't outrun the truth." His voice sent a chill down my spine. I didn't respond. I didn't want to. What was the point? He was right there sitting next to me, and I had no idea what he wanted or why he was doing this. "You don't have to be afraid," He continued, his voice smooth, almost soothing. "I'm not going to hurt you. I just need you to understand." I could feel my heart racing in my chest, the pounding getting louder with each passing second. "Understand what?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I didn't know if I was asking him or myself. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he just stared at me, his eyes glowing faintly in the dim light of the car. There was something terrifying in his gaze, something that made my skin crawl. "You're already a part of this," he said finally, his voice low and heavy with meaning. "You're already connected, whether you like it or not." I swallowed hard, trying to push down the knot that had formed in my throat. What the hell was he talking about? "No," I said, shaking my head. "This isn't happening. You're not real. None of this is real." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. I could feel the cold air, see the shadows moving in the corners of my eyes, hear his voice in my head. This wasn't some dream or hallucination. It was real. All of it. I sped up, my foot pressing harder on the gas pedal. But no matter how fast I went, it was like the road stretched on forever. Like there was no end to it. I couldn't escape. The man beside me didn't seem to notice or care. He just sat there, staring out the windshield with that same unreadable expression. "Why are you doing this to me?" I asked, my voice shaking. "You'll understand soon enough," he said, his voice cold and distant. "But by then it will be too late." I didn't know what to say to that. What could I say? How do you argue with someone who already seems to know everything about you? I looked ahead, my eyes scanning the road, trying to find something, anything, that would break the monotony of this nightmare. But then I saw it. Up ahead, barely visible in the distance, was something in the middle of the road. It was too far away to make out at first, but as I got closer, I saw it clearly. A figure. A person. I slammed on the brakes, my heart leaping into my throat. The car screeched to a halt, the tires burning against the road. "What the hell?" I whispered, staring in disbelief at the figure standing in the middle of the road. It was a woman, her back to me, wearing a long, flowing white dress. Her hair was long and tangled, hanging loosely around her shoulders. She didn't move, didn't acknowledge the car speeding toward her. "Is she real?" I muttered, half to myself, half to the man beside me. "She's real," he said quietly. "But she's not what you think." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. I didn't know if I should stop or keep going. But something in me, some instinct, told me I had no choice. I had to stop. I slowly brought the car to a halt a few feet from her. I could see her more clearly now. Her pale skin, the dark circles under her eyes, and the way she stood perfectly still in the middle of the road. "What do you want?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. She didn't answer. The silence was suffocating, like the world had stopped turning, like time itself had frozen. Then she turned around, and for the first time, I felt like my heart had stopped completely. Her eyes were black, not like they were dark or tired, but completely, unnaturally black, like there was nothing there. I couldn't breathe. The man beside me laughed softly, a cold, empty laugh. "You're finally seeing it now," he said. "You're seeing what you're meant to see." And then everything went black. The world around me shifted as I stared out the windshield, feeling like I was no longer in control. The road stretched ahead, but it felt like it was going nowhere. The trees, the landscape, the sky, they all seemed to blur together, like they were part of some distorted, fevered dream. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't find my voice. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles were turning white. The weight of the air in the car pressed on my chest, suffocating me. The man next to me, whatever he was, didn't seem to notice or care. He just sat there, staring ahead, his eyes reflecting nothing but the darkness. For a moment, I thought maybe I could just drive forever, keep going down this empty, desolate road. Maybe I'd get away from whatever this was from him. But then I heard it. A voice. A whisper. It was faint, barely audible over the hum of the car engine, but it was there. and it was calling my name. "Stop," the voice whispered. I froze, my foot hovering over the gas pedal. Was it real? Was it just my mind playing tricks on me? I turned to look at the man, but he was still staring straight ahead, unmoving. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see someone behind me, but there was nothing. "Stop," the voice repeated, louder this time. It felt like the car was being pulled toward the edge of something, like I was being drawn into the darkness, into the unknown. My heart raced, panic rising in my chest. I tried to shake it off, tried to convince myself it wasn't real, but I knew it was. I had known from the moment I picked him up. There was no escaping it. "Why are you doing this to me?" I asked, my voice trembling. The man turned his head slowly toward me, his face unreadable. For the first time, I saw something in his eyes, something almost human. "Because you asked for it," he said, his voice low and calm. "You just didn't know it." I didn't understand. My mind couldn't process it. What did he mean? How could I have asked for this? But before I could speak, the car lurched to a stop, the brakes squealing as if something was pushing against them from the other side. I looked out the window. The world outside had changed. The road was no longer a road. It was a dead end, leading to nothing but darkness. The trees were twisted and gnarled, their branches reaching out like claws. "This is it," the man said softly. "The end of the line." I didn't know what to do. My pulse was hammering in my ears. I was trapped. There was nowhere to go. Suddenly, the air grew colder. The darkness outside seemed to press in on the car, and I could feel a cold, unnatural presence gathering around us. "Get out," the man said. I turned to him, panic rising in my chest. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," he said. "You've already given everything." I didn't want to get out. I didn't want to face whatever was waiting for me in that darkness. But something inside me knew that I had no choice. With shaking hands, I opened the door and stepped out of the car. The moment my feet touched the ground, everything went still. There were no sounds. No birds, no wind, no hum of the engine. Just an oppressive silence that seemed to suffocate everything. And then I saw it. A figure standing at the edge of the darkness, watching me. It wasn't human. I could feel it in my bones. Its shape was wrong. Too tall, too thin, its limbs twisted in ways that made my stomach churn. Its eyes, if you could call them eyes, were dark and hollow, like two endless voids. I took a step back, but it didn't move. It didn't need to. "You've reached the point of no return," the man's voice echoed from behind me. "There's no going back now." I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. My body was frozen in place, paralyzed by fear. The figure took a step forward, and then another. It was coming toward me. I felt the coldness in the air grow heavier, suffocating me. My mind screamed for me to do something, anything, to escape. But there was nothing I could do. The darkness closed in around me, and then nothing. If this story left you feeling uneasy and full of doubt, don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribing to the channel is not just a way to keep up with new stories. It's your chance to stay in a world where monsters lurk in the shadows, and what seems ordinary may turn out to be something far more terrifying. Leave a like if you felt a chill run down your spine, and maybe it won't go away, because there's much more ahead that you need to see. Subscribe and be ready. No one and nothing will leave you alone.